The quiet fire. There was a boy who didn't speak much. In the modest suburbs of DeSoto, Texas, under skies streaked with heat and quiet dreams, Errol Spence Jr. learned to listen before he learned to fight. His house was small but filled with warmth. The floorboards creaked like familiar voices. His father, Errol Sr., a blue-collar man with hands hardened by work, believed in timing. He saw something in his son that others overlooked. "You don't need noise to make impact," he'd often say. His mother, soft-spoken but steady, whispered prayers every morning, the kind that left blessings on your shoulders like dust. Errol was no prodigy, not the loudest, not the biggest, but in the quiet he studied movements, reactions, weaknesses. He mimicked boxers from VHS tapes, his small fists slicing the air with shadowy precision. The gym wasn't a second home. It was home. Sweat stained his shirts before homework did. He hit the bag like it owed him answers. He wasn't fighting boys. He was fighting doubt. Childhood doubt. Community doubt. Self-doubt. Coach Derek James, a former pro with a stern jaw and sharp eyes, watched the boy from across the ring one late afternoon. No music played, just the sound of gloves thudding against worn leather and the occasional squeak of sneakers. "That kid's got a furnace inside," he muttered. "He just don't know it yet." At school, Errol was polite, quiet, invisible almost, the kind of kid teachers didn't worry about and classmates didn't remember. But in the ring, he was present, fully, ferociously present. Not angry, just aware, of space, of silence, of purpose. By 13, he was already skipping parties for sparring sessions. While others chased noise, he chased rhythm: jab, slip, hook, repeat. His hands moved like they had something to prove, and his eyes stayed locked on a future no one had handed him. Nothing was promised. Everything was earned. His father began driving him across cities, sometimes states, to amateur bouts. They traveled in silence, windows down, the hum of wheels a lullaby of ambition. Win or lose, his father only asked, "Did you learn something?" Errol always nodded. Always. And as the wins piled up, whispers began. "Who's this quiet kid from DeSoto?" Coaches leaned forward. Promoters took notes. But Errol never raised his voice. He let his gloves introduce him. Still, in those early days, victory didn't come easy. His first loss hit like betrayal. In the locker room, fists clenched, eyes wet, he sat in silence. His coach entered, knelt down and said, This is where most stop. Don't." The truth rises. Errol's rise in boxing wasn't sudden. It was the slow burn of discipline, calculated patience, and unyielding focus. At the age of 15, he became a fixture in Texas amateur boxing circuits. His name whispered by coaches, mentioned with quiet reverence. But it was his performance at the 2012 London Olympics that truly caught the eye of the world. The moment he stepped into the ring, the crowd knew this was more than just a fighter. This was a man shaped by a past of struggle, ambition, and silence. Yet, the Olympic dream didn't end in gold. Errol fought with grit, but the bronze medal was a bitter reminder that talent alone couldn't guarantee victory. Failure didn't taste sweet for a fighter who'd always been on the winning side of life's small battles. But it ignited something inside him. A shift from a boy trying to prove his worth to a man determined to make the world see his truth. Returning home, Errol didn't sulk. He didn't retreat. Instead, he immersed himself in the grind of the professional world. A world where noise and expectation were louder than any punch could ever be. The truth, as he would come to be known, wasn't built in gyms or from training alone. It was forged in the stillness between rounds, in the moments before the bell rang. His professional debut came in 2012, but it was in the years following that he started to become a name no one could ignore. Errol Spence Jr. was more than just his hands. He was a force, each fight unfolding with precision and determination. His punches landed like promises kept. His footwork calculated. His defense flawless. But with success came scrutiny. As his win streak stretched from city to city, Errol found himself grappling not just with opponents, but with the pressure of being crowned the future of American boxing. The expectations mounted. Every fight felt like a test of whether he could handle the weight of the sport's future on his shoulders. The world wanted to know if the quiet kid from DeSoto could handle the noise of the world that came with victory. His family remained his anchor. Errol Sr. was still the steady hand, still asking only one question: "Did you learn something?" And, as always, Errol's response was the same. A nod, a quiet affirmation that the journey wasn't just about winning. It was about something deeper, something more personal. Then came the first real test. Chris Algieri. A former world champion with speed and a slick boxing style, Algieri was supposed to be a challenge, a barrier between Errol and greatness. But Errol didn't see barriers. He saw patterns, movements, openings. And when the bell rang, he dismantled Algieri round by round. His body a weapon, his mind an unshakable force. The crowd's roar filled the arena. But in the stillness of his thoughts, Errol knew. This was just the beginning. His journey was no longer about proving the world wrong. It was about proving to himself that he had the heart to endure whatever came next. The crash that didn't break him. The world was moving too fast for Errol Spence Jr. A rising star in boxing, the weight of his title world champion, had settled onto his shoulders with a heaviness no one could see, but that he felt every waking moment. The pressure, the expectation, it was all there, silently eating away at him. And then, one night, in a moment of stillness, it all shattered. It was just before dawn on October 10th, 2019, when Errol, racing down the highway in his Ferrari, was thrown into a nightmare of metal and glass. A sudden swerve, a loss of control. The car flipped, tumbling end over end, a violent blur of sparks and twisting steel. He was thrown from the vehicle, his body slamming against the unforgiving asphalt. When the lights faded and the sirens screamed, Errol's world was already far beyond anything he could control. He woke in a hospital bed, his face bruised and swollen, his body torn from the crash. The fighter was unrecognizable. For the first time, he couldn't fight his way out of the darkness. In the weeks that followed, the questions were relentless. How could this happen to a man who seemed untouchable? What kind of fighter would emerge from the wreckage? Fans held their breath. The media was unsure what to say. But Errol didn't say anything. Not yet. He sat in silence, the kind of silence that echoed louder than any words could. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but they had to be. They weren't fighters. Errol didn't need hope. He needed time. Time to heal. Time to remember who he was beyond the gloves, beyond the titles. Who was he without the ring? For months, he fought not just against the physical damage of broken bones and torn muscles, but against the emotional wreckage of losing his sense of self. The quiet man from DeSoto had always defined himself by what he could do in the ring, by his strength, his focus, his ability to control the fight. But now, he was a man who could barely control his own body. The rehabilitation was long, the frustration unbearable. Some days, Errol would sit in his room, the stillness pressing down on him like a weight. But in the quiet of those lonely hours, something shifted. The same furnace that had burned inside him as a child began to stir once more. He wasn't done yet. He couldn't be. Not like this. His father's voice echoed in his mind. "Did you learn something?" Fighting forward. Errol Spence Jr. returned to the ring the way a storm returns to the horizon. Quietly, but with fury building in the distance. December 5th, 2020, was the day the world saw the truth again. Not in headlines, not in rumors, but in flesh and blood. His opponent was Danny Garcia, a man with sharp fists and a reputation that loomed large. The stakes were high. Everyone wondered if Errol could return to form, if the crash had robbed him of his edge. The bell rang. The crowd roared, but Errol only heard the rhythm of his own breath. His hands moved like the storm he had become. Fast, fluid, and unforgiving. The fight, at its core, wasn't just about boxing. It was about reclaiming something. Something beyond titles or belts. It was about proving to himself that he wasn't the man he had been after the crash. The one who sat in the dark and wondered if he would ever fight again. He was still the truth. Round after round, Errol dismantled Garcia. It wasn't just the punches that landed. It was the force behind each one, the weight of everything he had endured, everything he had learned. His body was scarred, his mind clearer than ever. Each jab, each hook wasn't just a statement to Garcia. It was a statement to everyone who had doubted him, to the critics, to the naysayers, to anyone who believed the crash had broken him. Errol's victory over Danny Garcia wasn't just a win on the scorecards. It was a victory against fate itself. The doubters who once whispered about his return were now silent, replaced by the sound of his fists hitting the canvas. But the journey didn't end there. There was still Terence Crawford, a fighter whose own legend had begun to grow. The matchup between Spence and Crawford wasn't just inevitable. It was the collision of two forces that had spent their careers climbing, fighting, enduring. Errol knew what the stakes were. The road to Crawford would be long. There were still questions to answer, still doubts to silence. But in the silence between rounds, Errol realized something profound. This fight was not about beating Crawford. It was about beating the world's expectations of him. It was about showing that no matter what had come before, no matter how many times life tried to knock him down, he was still standing. And he would keep standing. For a man who had been knocked down and nearly broken, it wasn't the titles that mattered anymore. It was the truth he carried, the truth of a fighter who